Welcome to True Crime Tuesdays, a weekly feature at Mark McNeese's Fearsome Fiction podcast. Every Tuesday, we'll take a break from the make-believe and delve into the dark heart of reality. True crime, dirty deeds, and shattered lives. Some of them will be solved, and some of them will forever be as cold as the grave. True crime narration provided by Wondervox.
There's a particular kind of dread that comes from a story with no ending. Most true crime cases eventually resolve into an arrest, a trial, a name in the history books. But every so often, a case slips through the cracks of justice entirely, and the guilty simply vanish into the landscape, never to be seen again. That's the case with the Bloody Benders, a family of killers who ran an inn on the Kansas prairie in the early 1870s, murdered as many as 20 travelers, and then disappeared so completely that to this day, no one is entirely sure who they really were. Let's listen to True Crime Tuesday's featured narrator, Veronica, tell the tale.
In 1870, a small family arrived in Labette County, Kansas, in the southeastern part of the state, an area still very much considered frontier at the time. They called themselves the Benders. There was John Bender, an older man, quiet and largely unable to speak English. There was a woman who went by Ma Bender, his wife, sharp-tongued and disliked almost immediately by the few neighbors who met her. And there were two younger people believed to be their children, John Bender Jr., a young man with an odd, unsettling laugh, and Kate Bender, a young woman who was, by every account, the opposite of her family. Kate was charming. Kate was attractive. Kate spoke fluent English, claimed to have psychic and healing powers, and quickly built a local reputation as a spiritualist, someone travelers might seek out for a reading or a cure. The Benders built a small structure along the Osage Trail, a route used by settlers and travelers moving through the region. It served as their home, a general store of sorts, and an inn, offering food and a place to rest for those passing through. The building had one particularly strange feature, a canvas curtain strung across the middle of the single main room, dividing the space in two. Guests would sit at a table on one side of that curtain to eat their meal, with Kate or Ma Bender serving them, while the curtain hung directly behind the guest's seat. That curtain, investigators would later determine, was the last thing many of those travelers ever saw. Over roughly 2 years, people passing through the area began to vanish. Not all at once, not in a way that immediately drew suspicion, just a slow, steady trickle of men who set out along the trail and were never heard from again. Some were locals, some were strangers, passing through with money, planning to buy land further west. Neighbors began to whisper. A man named Dr. William York went looking for his brother, who had disappeared after being seen heading toward the Bender place. And Dr. York himself vanished shortly after asking the Benders directly whether they'd seen him. That was the beginning of the end for the family, though it wouldn't come quickly enough for justice to actually catch them. Dr. York had powerful, well-connected relatives, and his disappearance triggered a real search, something the earlier missing travelers hadn't received. A meeting was organized among the local community to discuss the disappearances, and the Benders themselves reportedly attended, with Kate again offering to use her supposed psychic gifts to help locate the missing men. Not long after that meeting, the family disappeared. When neighbors finally went out to the abandoned inn, they found it empty. The family and their belongings gone, livestock left to fend for themselves. It was only once people began searching the property itself that the full horror came into view. The ground near the house had a strange, sunken quality in places, and when they began to dig, they found bodies buried in an orchard behind the home. Investigators would eventually recover the remains of at least 11 victims, though some believe the true number may be as high as 20, given how many travelers had vanished from that stretch of trail over the 2 years the Benders operated there. The method, once understood, painted a chilling picture of exactly what that curtain had been for. A guest would be seated at the table for a meal, positioned with their back to the canvas divider. From the other side, one of the Bender men would strike the guest with a hammer, and the body would then be dropped through a trapdoor into a small cellar beneath the house. Some victims showed signs of having their throats cut as well, likely to ensure the job was finished. Once the family was ready, the bodies would be carried out under cover of darkness and buried in the orchard. A massive manhunt followed. Rewards were offered, sightings were reported for years afterward. All of it went nowhere. Some later claimed the family was caught by a vigilante posse and killed quietly, off the books, with no trial and no public record, a kind of frontier justice that conveniently left no evidence behind. Others believed they simply split up and vanished into the vastness of the American West, starting new lives under new names, blending into the anonymity of a rapidly growing country. Several women arrested in later years were suspected of being Kate Bender, including one held in Michigan, but nothing was ever definitively proven, and no one was ever convicted for the murders. To this day, historians and investigators still debate who the Benders really were, whether they were truly a family at all, or a group of unrelated people who adopted that identity together, and what finally became of them after they slipped away from that little house on the Kansas prairie. What remains is the image of that canvas curtain and the particular cruelty of a con built entirely on hospitality.
You're listening to Mark McNeese's Fearsome Fiction podcast. Mysteries, thrillers, and rare finds. Fasten your headphones.